4 years ago, the man who owned half of Vancouver's waterfront looked at her across a boardroom table and told her she was replaceable. That was the word he used. Replaceable. Like she was a part in a machine he was already upgrading. She had believed him because she was 28 and in love, and those two things together made a person dangerously credulous. She had left the same night. She had driven east on the Trans-Canada with nothing but a duffel bag and the particular clarity that comes after something inside you finally breaks clean. She had not told him about the pregnancy. She had not known about it yet herself. Now it was a Tuesday morning in October, and Nora Callahan, or Dr. Nora Callahan, as the people of Fenwick, Ontario knew her, was trying to convince her 4-year-old daughter to put on her boots before the school bus came, and she was losing. "They're wet," said Juniper. "They're not wet. They feel wet, Junie." Nora did not look up from the lunch bag she was packing, because if she looked up, she would say something she would need to apologize for later. And she had already used up her morning patience on the argument about whether toast could be both burned and not burned at the same time. "Put the boots on. We have 4 minutes." Juniper sat on the mat by the front door and regarded her rubber boots with the deep philosophical suspicion of a child who had decided to make footwear a moral issue. What if my feet get cold inside the wetness? What if you miss the bus and have to walk to school in the rain without any boots at all? A pause. The logic landed. Juniper pulled the first boot on. This was how Nora's mornings went. This was how they had gone for 4 years, since she had moved to Fenwick with a medical school placement she had accepted, mostly because it was somewhere she had never been and where no one would think to look for her. The town sat an hour west of Ottawa, small enough to have one traffic light and large enough to have opinions about everything. She had taken over a retiring GP's practice. She had learned which families had dogs that bit and which didn't, which roads flooded in March, where to buy decent coffee when the cafe was closed on Mondays. She had built something out of nothing, the way people did when the alternative was sitting in the rubble. Juniper got both boots on by the time the bus turned onto their street. Nora handed her the lunch bag and the backpack shaped like a fox and kissed the top of her head, and watched her run down the front walk in the rain. She stood in the doorway for a moment after the bus pulled away. The October sky over Fenwick was the color of old pewter, the kind of gray that meant business. The maples along the road had given up most of their leaves, and the remaining ones were the deep rust and amber that looked beautiful in photographs and depressing in person. She had learned to love it anyway. She had made herself learn a lot of things. Her clinic opened at 9. She had 40 minutes. She was pulling on her coat when her phone rang. Her receptionist, Barb, calling from the front desk even though the front desk was 8 minutes away. "There's a man here," Barb said. She had the careful voice she used for things that required careful voices. "Tell him we open at 9. He knows. He's been here since 8:15. A pause. "He asked for you by name, your old name." Nora stopped moving. Her hand was on the coat zipper and it stayed there. "Which name?" she said. But she already knew. There was only one name she had stopped using. There was only one person who had ever used it the way it apparently had been used this morning, which was to say, like it was the only name that mattered. "Callahan," Barb said. "He asked for Dr. Nora Callahan." But then he said, a brief hesitation, the kind that meant Barb was choosing her words. He said he was looking for Nora Webb. Webb. She had not heard that name in 4 years. She had spent 4 years training herself not to flinch when she heard it in other contexts, other people's mouths, because it was not an uncommon name, and the world was indifferent to the association she had built around it. She flinched now. "Tell him I'll be there at 9, she said. She arrived at 8:47 because she had walked faster than usual without deciding to, which was her body doing something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She came in through the back entrance and through the hallway past the exam rooms, and she stopped at the door to the waiting room and looked through the narrow glass panel. He was sitting in one of the green chairs by the window. He had not brought an umbrella. His coat was wet from the rain, and he didn't appear to have noticed. He was looking at the children's corner across the room, The low table with a basket of picture books and the wooden puzzles, the small chairs that nobody his size could use. He was looking at it with an expression she couldn't fully read from this angle and distance, but she recognized the quality of it, the stillness of someone who had arrived somewhere and was now reckoning with what that meant. Finnian Webb had not changed in the ways she had hoped he might. She had constructed, over 4 years, a version of him that had softened and blurred and become manageable. It was a necessary fiction, and she had gotten quite good at maintaining it. The reality was that he was still exactly the man she remembered in all the ways that had ever caused her problems. The same set to his jaw, the same economy of posture, the way he sat like he was conserving something. Like relaxation was a resource he didn't trust himself to spend. He was 41 now, which meant the gray that had been starting at his temples 4 years ago had finished the job. It suited him, which was irritating. She pushed through the door. He looked up. She had a plan for this moment, a version of it she had rehearsed in the car. She would be professional, measured. She would ask him to come into an exam room, close the door, determine what he wanted, and how quickly she could make him leave. What she said was, "How did you find me?" Not a question. She knew it wasn't a question because she already knew the answer was complicated and she didn't want to invite the elaboration. Finnian stood. He was taller than she'd allowed him to be in her memory. "Nora, don't," she said. "We're in my place of work. You will tell me what you want, and then you will leave." Barb was pretending to look at the appointment book. She was not looking at the appointment book. "Can we speak somewhere private?" he said. She turned and walked back toward the hallway. He followed. She took him to the consultation room at the end, the one she used for difficult conversations. It had a window that looked onto the parking lot, 2 chairs, and a desk she didn't sit behind because she had learned from a supervisor in residency that sitting behind a desk when you needed to have a real conversation with someone was a way of avoiding the conversation. She sat in 1 chair. He did not sit. "How long have you been in Fenwick?" he said. "That's not what you came to ask me." "No." He looked at the window, the parking lot, the gray October morning happening steadily outside it. "My assistant found a medical journal article 18 months ago. Your name was in the author list." She had published that paper with her colleague in Ottawa and had listed her current institution. She had not thought about the possibility because she had stopped thinking about the possibility. 4 years was long enough to make a person believe the risk had passed. It had not passed. "Why now?" she said. "The paper was 18 months ago." "Because 18 months ago I wasn't ready to." He stopped. He was not a man who started sentences he didn't know how to finish. The fact that he had was information. "Ready to what?" she said. He turned from the window. His eyes were the same, the dark particular shade of green that she had once thought was the most specific color she'd ever seen on a person, like it had been mixed for him specifically. She had spent 4 years training herself to think of it neutrally. She was not successful at this right now. "There are things I didn't handle correctly," he said. "That's a very curated description of what happened. I know. You told me I was replaceable, Finn." The word landed between them. She watched him take it, the slight shift in his face, the thing that moved behind his eyes and then settled into something that looked like it had been there a long time. "I know," he said again. "I know that. And then you replaced me. Very efficiently, I might add. Within 3 months. That was a mistake." "Which part?" "All of it." He sat down finally in the other chair, not across the desk, just the other chair, close enough that she could see the exhaustion on him, the kind that wasn't about sleep. She left 8 months after. It wasn't what I was trying to make it. I was trying to make something work that was already wrong because I didn't want to admit what I'd thrown away." "Very flattering," Nora said. "I appreciate you coming all this way to tell me how sad you were after you discarded me." "That's not why I'm here." She waited. "I was at the school," he said. "The one down the road this morning before I came here." He stopped. There was a little girl outside, dark hair. She had a backpack shaped like a fox. He looked at her. "She had my mother's eyes, Nora, the exact color. I have never seen that color on anyone who wasn't my mother or me." The room was quiet. The rain tapped against the parking lot window. She was getting off a small bus, he said. She was talking to another child about something. Very serious conversation. She had this way of, he stopped again, and this time the stop was the kind that meant the emotion was ahead of the words, and he was trying to catch up to it. She had this way of tilting her head when she was making a point, like she was a professor explaining something obvious. Nora said nothing. Nora. His voice had changed. It had shed whatever professional scaffolding he'd brought in with him. Tell me. You don't have a right to a telling, she said, and her voice was mostly steady. You told me I was replaceable, and you moved on in 3 months, and I built a life here, and I am not obligated to dismantle it because you found a journal article. I'm not asking you to dismantle anything. Then what are you asking? He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the rain was picking up. I'm asking if she's mine, he said, and I'm asking because I need to know. Not to take anything from you. Not because I'm not here to make a legal argument, Nora. I'm here because if I have a daughter I have spent 4 years not knowing about, I would like to. He pressed his hand flat against his knee, a gesture she remembered, the thing he did when he was holding something very still inside him. I would like to know her, if she'd let me, if you'd let me, and I understand that's a very large if. Nora looked at him for a long time. The thing about this moment was that she had rehearsed it too, not often, and not on purpose, but in the way that the mind returned to certain doors, even when you'd decided they were closed. She had rehearsed the version where she said yes, and the version where she said nothing, and the version where she called Barb and asked her to call the police. She had not rehearsed feeling this particular thing. Whatever this was. The complicated arithmetic of old love and real damage, and a 4-year-old with his mother's eye color who tilted her head like a professor making a point. Her name is Juniper, she said finally. He closed his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them, they were different. Junie, she said. She goes by Junie. Junie, he said, like he was trying the weight of it. She is 4 years and 3 months old. She likes the color orange and believes very strongly that foxes are better than dogs, which I have chosen not to argue with. She is very serious about her opinions. Nora's voice was even, which surprised her. She has never asked about her father, or she has once, in the way 4-year-olds ask things. She asked where he was, and I said he lived far away, and she said okay, and asked if we could have macaroni for dinner. Finnian made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and not quite the other thing, somewhere between. She is not going to have any idea who you are, Nora said. You cannot walk into her life with a speech about being her father. She's 4. She needs consistency and gentleness and time. She looked at him, and I need to know that you are here, that you are actually going to be here in Fenwick, not in Vancouver making decisions that affect this family from 2,000 miles away. I'll be here, he said. Finn. Her voice had the edge in it that came from 4 years of being the only person responsible for someone small and important. I need more than I'll be here. I have heard you say things you meant in the moment and didn't follow through on. I have personal experience with the gap between what you intend and what you do. He took this. He didn't argue it. Tell me what you need, he said. I need you to rent somewhere in town, not a hotel, somewhere you actually live. And I need you to be there for a month before Junie knows you exist. I need to see that you stay, okay. And I need you to understand that if you leave, if something comes up in Vancouver and you decide your business is more important, or if the reality of this is harder than you thought and you pull back, that is not something she recovers from easily. She's 4. She will remember. I will not let her be someone you tried. I understand. Do you? Yes, he met her eyes. I know what I cost you. I know I don't have the right to walk back in here and expect grace. I'm not expecting grace. I'm asking for a chance to earn it, and I know the difference. She looked at him for a long time. She was looking for the version of him she'd turned him into in her memory, the softened, manageable version. She couldn't find it because he was sitting right in front of her, being something more complicated than that. There's a rental on Douglas Street, she said, the Hendersons. They rent the upper unit. It has a parking spot and the heat works, which matters because you are not built for Ontario winters. Something moved across his face. Not call them to dial. And Finn. She stood. Their appointment, such as it was ending. She needed to open her clinic and see her patients and have a day that was as normal as a day could be after something like this morning. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if there is an us to even have a conversation about. I need you to understand that the door I'm opening is for Junie, not for you. Understood, he said. She believed him. She wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe because he had come in without a lawyer. Maybe because he had pressed his hand flat on his knee when he was holding something very still. Maybe because the exhaustion on him was real in the way that performance never quite was. She walked him back to the waiting room. Barb was still pretending to look at things. He'll call you about the Douglas Street unit, Nora told her, because Barb's sister-in-law was the Henderson who handled rentals, and in a town with one traffic light information moved faster than she had ever made peace with. Barb looked up. Right, she said, in the tone of someone who had already connected several dots. Nora went and opened her clinic. The next 3 weeks were the longest of her life, which was a large claim given her history, but she stood by it. Finnian called the Hendersons the same afternoon. He moved into the Douglas Street unit 5 days later, which meant he had wrapped up or delegated whatever needed wrapping and delegating in Vancouver with a speed that told her something about how seriously he was taking this. She noticed this and filed it away in the part of her that was still keeping score, which she was aware was not a generous part of her but was a part of her nonetheless. He did not contact her again for 9 days, which was exactly what she had asked for, and somehow still managed to feel both right and strange. She drove past Douglas Street on her way home from the clinic, and she did not slow down, or told herself she didn't. On the 10th day, he sent a text. I went to the Thursday farmer's market. The woman selling apple butter yelled at me for squeezing the preserves. Is that normal? She sat in her kitchen looking at it for long enough that Junie asked her why she was making that face. What face? Nora said. The thinking face. I'm always thinking. Not like that. That's the hard thinking face. She put the phone away. She texted back, later, after Junie was in bed. Yes, that's normal. Don't squeeze Meredith's preserves. A pause. Then, noted. How's the fox enthusiast? She put the phone face down on the counter and looked at the ceiling. She told Junie on a Saturday morning in early November. She had thought about how to do this for weeks, had researched it, had called a colleague in Ottawa who was a child psychologist, and had a 20-minute conversation about developmentally appropriate language for 4-year-olds. She had prepared. What she said was, Junie, you remember how you asked about your dad? Juniper was eating toast and not looking up. The one far away. He's actually here now, in Fenwick. Juniper looked up. Here like at our house? Here like in our town. He's been here for a few weeks. Junie looked at the toast and then back at Nora. She had the processing face, the one that appeared when she was running something through the small, serious machinery of her mind. Can I meet him? That's up to you. Does he like foxes? I'll ask him. She texted him. Junie wants to know if you like foxes. This is a determining factor. He responded 12 minutes later with a photo. He had apparently bought a small ceramic fox figurine at the farmer's market, and it was sitting on his kitchen windowsill. She stared at the photo for a long time. I'll take that as a yes, she sent back. They met at the park on a Sunday afternoon. Nora arrived first with Junie, who was wearing her orange rain jacket and had opinions about the correct way to approach the swings. Finnian arrived 5 minutes later, on foot, which meant he'd walked from Douglas Street, which was 20 minutes. He had brought nothing, no toy or gift or prop, because she had told him on the phone the night before that if he arrived with some enormous stuffed animal, she would send him home. He crouched down when he reached them. He was at Junie's eye level. He said, You must be Juniper. Junie looked at him with the particular evaluating gaze she turned on new people. You're Finn, she said. I am. Mom said your name. She said, You're my dad. That's right. I told my friend Daisy I was getting a dad. She said, That's cool. A pause. Do you like foxes? I have a ceramic one on my windowsill. That's not the same as a real one. That's fair. Real ones are better. Junie appeared to accept this answer. She turned back to the swings. I'm going to go on the swings now. You can watch if you want. She ran ahead. Finnian straightened up. He looked at Nora. His expression was the kind that had no curated edges, the kind he might not have known he was making. "She's remarkable," he said. "I know." He looked back at the swings, where Junie was already telling the mechanism how she wanted it to behave, in the specific tone of a person who had inherited a significant expectation of being listened to. He watched her the way people watched things they were afraid might not be real. "I missed 4 years," he said. "Yes, that's on me. I know that's on me. It's on both of us," she said, which surprised her, the willingness to say it. "I could have told you. I made a choice not to. I was angry and I was hurt and I was 28, and those things felt like enough reason at the time." She put her hands in her coat pockets. "They were reasons. I'm not sure they were good enough ones. I've thought about it for 4 years and I'm still not sure." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for saying that. Don't thank me. It's not absolution. It's just honesty. I know." The weeks that followed were not simple. She had not expected them to be. Finnian came to the park on Sundays. He came to the library reading circle on Wednesday mornings because Junie announced she wanted him to, and Nora had established, early, that she would not make the decisions about what Junie wanted from this relationship. He sat in the tiny chairs and listened to the librarian read picture books about bears planning camping trips, and he did not once look like he was managing the situation. He looked like he was in it. He made mistakes. He brought an iPad once, thinking Junie might want to watch something, and Nora had to explain in the parking lot afterward that Junie didn't have screen time on Wednesday mornings, and he had listened without defending himself, which was either genuine humility or excellent strategy, and she still hadn't decided which. He called on a Tuesday to say he might be 20 minutes late to the Sunday park visit because of a call from Vancouver, and she had said nothing, and he had said, "I'll reschedule the call," and she had said, "That's up to you," and he had rescheduled the call. She noticed all of it. She kept noticing it, the way she kept a clinical observation log, the way she documented things she hadn't yet decided what to do with. Her sister called from Edmonton in early December. Petra, older by 3 years, and the person who had driven from Edmonton to Ottawa the week Nora arrived in Ontario 4 years ago, and helped her set up the apartment and never once said "I told you so," which Nora had appreciated more than she'd ever found the words for. "Barb Henderson called my friend who knows your Barb," Petra said. "Small world is a catastrophic understatement." "There's nothing to report," Nora said. "He's been there 2 months. I know how long he's been here. Is he?" "He's trying," Nora said, which was the most honest answer she had and also the most complicated one. "He's trying in ways I didn't expect. Junie likes him." She told him last week that he's a good listener for a grown-up. Petra was quiet for a moment. "And you?" "I'm not ready to answer that question." "Okay," Petra said. And then, because she was Petra, "But you're asking it." Nora didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. December in Fenwick was the kind of cold that came in fast and meant business. The first real snowfall happened on a Thursday, and by the time Nora walked out of the clinic that evening, the town looked like something from a card. Junie lost her mind entirely. She had been waiting for snow with the focused intensity of someone monitoring a delayed shipment. Finnian had shoveled her walk. She stood at the end of her driveway, looking at the clean, cleared path and the steps and the neatly piled snow to the side. He had used the shovel from her garage, which meant he had known where it was, which meant he had been paying attention to the kind of details that people only paid attention to when they were actually thinking about another person's daily life rather than the performance of thinking about it. She went inside. She texted him. "Thank you for the walk," he responded. "The trick is to do it while it's still falling so you only go over it once." She sat at her kitchen table with her coat still on and thought about the 4 years, the weight of them, the specific cost of rebuilding after someone took the ground out from under you, the particular stubbornness required to build something good on that ground, and then to stand here in December with snow on the boots and a daughter asleep upstairs and a man who had shoveled her walk, and to try to determine what was fair. She thought about what she'd said to him on the first day. "The door is for Junie, not for you." She was still not sure that was a lie. On Christmas Eve, she invited him for dinner. It was a small dinner, just the three of them and Petra, who had driven down from Edmonton in the way Petra did things, without being asked and without making a production of it. Petra had met Finnian once, briefly, 4 years ago, and had opinions she had thus far kept to herself, which Nora suspected was costing her considerable effort. Junie sat next to him at the dinner table and talked for approximately 40 minutes about the classification of foxes versus dogs, which was a topic she returned to periodically, like a thesis she was always revising. Finnian listened with genuine attention and asked questions that suggested he had done some research, which Nora noticed because she noticed everything, and because the research was either real or performed, and she was fairly sure by now which one it was. Petra cornered her in the kitchen during dishes. "Okay," Petra said. "Okay what? He's good with her. I know. Nora, I know, Petra." Her sister handed her a dish to dry. "You're allowed to let it be more than one thing. It can be true that he hurt you, and also true that he's trying to do better, and also true that you're not sure yet. Those things aren't in competition." Nora dried the dish. From the living room came Junie's voice, explaining something. Then Finnian's voice, asking a question. Then Junie's voice, with the particular quality it got when an adult had asked exactly the right thing. "She sounds happy," Nora said. "She does," Petra said. "So do you." "A bit." Nora handed back the dish. "Don't push it." Petra smiled, the particular smile she had that meant she was right and knew it, and was going to be gracious about it, which was somehow worse. "I'm not pushing anything. The New Year came the way New Year's did in Fenwick, quietly, the way everything came in a town that had decided long ago not to be dramatic about time passing. In January, Finnian asked if he could take Junie to the skating rink on Saturday mornings. Nora said yes, and watched from the warming hut the first time, her coffee going cold in her hand, watched him hold Junie's hands at the edge of the ice while she found her balance, and then let go, gradually, the way you let go of something when you trusted it to hold its own weight. She drove home afterward with Junie asleep in the back, exhausted from the rink and the hot chocolate and the enormous seriousness of learning something new. She sat in the driveway for a minute before going in. She called him from the driveway. He picked up on the second ring. She skated without holding on, he said, before she could say anything. For almost 3 seconds. "I know," she said. "I saw." She was furious when she fell down. She has a temper. She got that from somewhere. A pause, not uncomfortable, the kind of pause that had space in it. "Nora," he said. "I know," she said, which wasn't a specific response to anything he had said or was about to say, but which meant something nonetheless. "I'm not going back," he said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm not here on a trial basis. Vancouver is handled. I have people I trust there. This is where I am. And then, come for dinner Sunday? Not the park. Dinner." The silence was short. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." She went inside. She woke Junie gently and carried her up to bed, which she could still do for approximately 5 more months before Junie would be too tall for it, and she was aware of this and was making the most of the remaining time. She tucked her in. Juniper, half asleep, reached up and held onto Nora's sleeve for a moment, the grip that meant she was almost gone, almost under, 1 foot in sleep. "Mama," she said. Finn said I'll be able to skate by spring. He's probably right. He said he'll teach me to go fast. I believe him." Juniper let go of the sleeve. She was quiet for a moment. "I like that he's here," she said, in the simple way children stated the things that adults took pages to get around to. "Me too," Nora said. She turned off the light. She stood in the hallway for a moment, in the particular quiet of a house where a small person was sleeping, and the heat was working, and outside the Ontario winter was doing what Ontario winters did, indifferent and thorough. The months ahead were not going to be clean. She knew that. There were still conversations they hadn't had. Still the arithmetic of the lost years that would surface sometimes in the middle of other things and need to be reckoned with. There was still the question of who they were to each other now, what shape that took, whether what had been broken could be rebuilt into something that held more weight than what had come before. But Juniper had found her skates, and Finnian had shoveled the walk without being asked. And in the morning there would be coffee and the specific chaos of getting a 4-year-old ready before the school bus, and Barb would be at the clinic already, and the maples on the road would be covered in ice that would catch the early light and make Fenwick look like a different place entirely. Better than it usually managed. It was enough to go on. It was, she thought, exactly enough.